it's like most things, right? Things that we thought were a weakness can also double as a strength, and the opposite is also true. But um, yes, it is open doors for me. I would not be where I am today if I was not gay, and I did not mean to make those rhyme, but that sounds like maybe a country song I need to write. Uh, yeah, the country world loves gay artists. No, so yeah, it's it's turned from being this, horrible thing that plagued me to walking through a journey where I reconciled my faith with my sexuality, realizing I don't have to choose. I don't have to hang up my faith card because you don't hang up a card. But I didn't have to turn in my faith card because I'm gay, and I also don't have to shut down that part of me because I have a strong faith.
Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Terry Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion. Learn the truth behind the alcohol myths and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge. You're listening to episode 141 of the Sober Edge podcast. So welcome to today's episode. I want to share a little bit more about my guest and set up this episode. And I am delighted to introduce you to Lindsey Kane Leaverton. We had such a great time recording this podcast together. I think you're going to hear us laughing a lot. But that's not to say we don't have a serious subject that we're talking about. So Lindsey and her team reached out to share about her new book, Not Another Self-Help Book. So we're going to talk about how she wrote this book in 16 chapters around the gifts of. And she talks in these 16 chapters about some of the hardest things we go through as humans. So there are chapters about the gift of trauma, the gift of addiction. And Lindsey is very candid about her own journey through trauma and coming out as gay and losing just about everything. We also talk about some of the things that drive us crazy when it comes to these platitudes that people have, such as everything happens for a reason. So you're going to hear us dive into a variety of topics. And I really enjoyed this conversation with Lindsey. I think her perspective is unique and fresh and helpful for all of us. We have a hilarious conversation where she shares a metaphor about twin 2-year-olds pitching a tent, which I think you'll also really enjoy. And at the end, I ask if I could share a chapter I would like to see. And so you can listen in and find out what chapter I would add to the book. Just a quick aside, I do want to note that Lindsey herself does not identify as alcohol-free or sober. She is someone who has attended Al-Anon and has faced the trauma of addiction within her family. None of my guests are required to be alcohol-free unless they identify as an alcohol-free person or coach. But that's not a requirement to come on the podcast. But we never will glorify alcohol or drinking alcohol on this podcast. So I just wanted to give you that heads up in case you follow Lindsey on social media. And she's very candid about who she is. And again, she has a deep respect. We even talk about the 12 steps and some of the Al-Anonisms that she has grown to love. So I'll see you over in the podcast episode. I am excited to get your feedback on this episode. Well, hey, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Sober Edge podcast. And I think you're going to fall in love with my guest today because, first of all, I just want to tell you the name of the book that she wrote that we're going to talk about, which is Not Another Self-Help Book. Can we just say hallelujah? Sometimes we get stuck in this place of working on ourselves where we get kind of that recovery fatigue. So I am so delighted to welcome Lindsey Kane Leaverton to the podcast. And we're going to talk about Why It's Not Another Self Help Book. So, Lindsey, welcome.
Hi, Terry. Thank you for having me. I am so excited to be talking to you. And hello, everyone who's listening or watching.
Yeah, so tell us, where did you come up with that title? Because it's fabulous.
Well, thank you. That was the third title that I landed on. The first one was The Gift of Pain, and then the second one was Not Everything Happens for a Reason, which I loved. That was really shocking. But all those were either taken or something about search engine optimization. I don't understand any of that stuff. And so I started to think about this is technically a self-help book, but it's not just another self-help book. And I love the double entendre of the eye roll. Like, oh God, not another self-help book. And also it's not another self-help book. So that's where we landed.
Well, one of the most unique things about your book is it's not just a book. It is also connected to some of your original songs, and it's an adult coloring book.
Yes, yes. So in between each chapter, I personally tend to read books and zoom through them. I'll go from chapter 1 to 2 to 3, and I don't really give myself any time to let the like the seed be watered of what I just read. So I wanted it to be this multi-method experience where you're moving through the book, and before you go on to chapter 2, there's a adult coloring book page I created between every chapter, and then a QR code that leads to one of my original songs that aligns with the concept of the chapter. And there's elements of humor and stories, and it's all over the place, similar to my brain.
Yeah, I love that. All over, similar to your brain. Well, I think that is such a wonderful concept because yeah, we tend to read, and I run a couple of different I do a book study with my audience. I also have a Sober Edge book club, and part of that is because when we have a conversation about the book, we just get more out of it. We need to slow down, like you said. We need to have a way to process what it is we're learning and hearing, and your book is deep in a lot of ways because you talk about these kind of intense subjects. And you mentioned the gift of. And so each of your chapter headings talks about the gift of something that I think most of us might consider a hard place.
Yes, or just straight up shit. So the subtitle is Finding Gifts in the Midst of Life Shit. Can I cuss on this
Yeah,
podcast?
where you're going to now. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We're good.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay, you're gonna get that explicit rating on Apple or whatever. Yeah, it's definitely not something that you would think of. Oh, the gift of tragedy, the gift of trauma, loss, unanswered prayers, and then one of my favorite chapters, the gift of addiction. If you would have told me there was a gift in addiction when I first got into the rooms of Al-Anon, I thought the people in Al-Anon were just, quite frankly, kind of crazy, saying, I'm thankful for the alcoholic in my life now because I've learned XYZ. I thought, are you kidding me? Addiction has destroyed my family. How can you possibly find a gift? And then, not in every horrible thing that happens is there a gift, but sometimes there is, and that can redeem whatever shit you had to go through.
Mhm. Yeah, and wow, I can so resonate with that because I can look back now and think I'm so different because of this experience that I've had. And we don't get where we are without going through what we went through. And, it seems so trite, but when we explore it from the gift of addiction, we really can see that learning about ourselves and even being forced to learn about ourselves is a place that we don't go into willingly.
No, kicking and screaming.
Yeah, and so when we have this opportunity and we can look back and see, I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to face the things that were holding me back. It really is a gift.
For this. Well, I'm glad that you see that, because I my fear was that someone would pick up the book and be in the middle. I mean, truly in the middle of trauma, for example. and get so triggered that they're not able to really move through the book. And so I try to put in the intro, hey, if there's a chapter that's just too close for comfort right now, then move past it. There's 15 others that you can read and maybe come back to it at a different time. But it is that path of joy and sorrow always seem to kind of be together, and they seem to be inextricably linked. I know that's true for my life, and so starting to see pain and addiction and trauma, whatever the thing is, starting to see those events with new eyes, and then as we start to get some proximity from the pain, whatever in all its forms, we can start to get a little bit more clarity about, oh, that was horrible, and also this one thing beautiful came out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're exactly right. So often it's that perspective shift of on the other side. And it's hard in the midst of it. And it can be very off-putting to have someone say, well, someday you're going to look back on this as a gift, and you just sort of want to punch them in the face.
Yeah, it's how I feel about the people that, say after a school shooting, or what's going on around the world with various wars and geopolitical issues. Oh, God's in control, everything happens for a reason. Sometimes things just happen. And just because we can find a reason eventually, sometimes we can't. But just because we can, it doesn't mean that there's some, you know, gray-haired old dude in the clouds, like Santa, the good and naughty list, and this woman gets cured of cancer, but this woman doesn't get cured of cancer. It's just at some point that belief doesn't hold up, because stuff will continue to happen. And it's really about, okay, how am I going to respond to this? My higher power is not out to get me. The universe is not out to get me or punish me. Oh, I guess I got in this wreck because I stole a pack of gum when I was 4. No, it's life. It's messy. It's filled with imperfect humans, me being one of the most imperfect, and what are you going to do? You're going to keep showing up, put one foot in front of the other, the whole do the next right thing. And that, I think, for me, is the only way I can get through life and enjoy it and be present, is if I'm able to, challenge that view of, I've got to know what's going to happen in the future, and just say, I've got today. Today's all I've got. Tomorrow's not promised. My next breath isn't promised. So what am I going to do, to enjoy life to the fullest, and also ideally make a difference?
Yeah, yeah. And you talk about that, yeah, control. I think that's always been a big one for me. Is there the gift of letting go? Is that one of the chapters?
No, but I will say that is my tattoo, my let go
Ooh.
tattoo. Yeah. There, the gift of letting go definitely could be a chapter if I was doing the gift of things that sound really nice, right? Because letting go is like, freedom, and it doesn't pack as much of a punch as, the gift of trauma. But I tell you what, that's why, speaking of sober living and everything you do on your podcast, that's the serenity prayer. I mean, that's all the serenity prayer is. We have this illusion of control, like so much people, places, things are in our control, and it's not. And I've really just got control over right here, what's going on between my ears. Uh, One thing I love, it's an Al-Anonism, and you may also have it in the rooms of AA if you're in program. But that I'm not responsible for my first thought, but I am responsible for my second thought and my first action. And that just has blown me away, if I can remember to actually live like that.
Oh, I haven't heard that before, but it reminds me of, how we're not supposed to believe everything we think. Like, don't do that. And don't act on everything you think. And, allow that your brain is creating meaning out of things that are not true and old patterns, all of those things. I like to call it bossing your brain around.
Oh, I like that. Yes, my brain is constantly out to get me. That I talk a lot in the book about the amygdala hijack, how you're presented with a perceived threat, and your amygdala is just, okay, how can we need to assess the risk, we need to address it, we need to mitigate it, and so our brains just spin out, and a lot of the times it's my right brain feeding my left brain some bullshit that it believes. And then I'm kind of caught in this echo chamber between my ears, and I can get really stuck in my head. So I have to be present. That's my personal antidote for worrying and getting in my head is presence. What am I wearing? Let's say I need to be present in this moment. I see a star behind you.
Mm.
I see your cabinets. I can hear my dog licking her paw incessantly on the bed over there. What do I feel? I feel like the temperature is really nice. The clothes on my body, how those feel. And that just brings me right back to this present moment and gets me out of my head, because my head is a battlefield,
Mm.
you know, from moment to moment.
Yeah, I think that most of us feel that way, certainly. And I remember when I first sort of caught on to the concept that being in the future and worry is motion, not action.
Ooh, say more about that.
Well, the only place we can take action is in the present moment. We
Mm-hmm.
cannot take action in the future. So when we worry, we think it feels good, I think, Lindsey, for many of us because it feels productive. And
Yes.
when I remind myself that there's nothing productive about worry because it's in the future, there's no action, then I can come back to, oh, I can come back more easily to the present moment, knowing that there may be action I can take here.
Ooh, that's good. I've never heard that. That's really, really good.
Maybe I made it up.
I I look, effective immediately, you made it up, because I haven't heard it. Maybe you'll get an email from someone saying, "No, here's the source," but until you get that email, it's Terry Patterson,
There you
TM,
go.
trademark.
All right. I like it. I like it. So you have in your book, you have these chapters about the gift of, and there's 16, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, you're good.
What is your favorite? What is the one that really, speaks to your heart the most?
It's gonna have to be chapter 16, which oddly enough was the first chapter I ever wrote. It was the concept that the book is built on, yet it's the last chapter in the book, and it's the gift of pain. And it is where I get to unpack my 15-year journey with chronic pain, with absolutely little to no relief in that time, despite, you know, all the doctors and tests and whatever else. But that's where I get to share a very special story that I won't spoil, because it's the experience I had that saved my life. I had just come out in 2009. I was in full-time ministry, and I came out, and I lost everything. I lost my career, my, identity, because these organizations that were booking me to lead worship and to tour and speak, they are not the biggest fans of openly gay worship leaders, you know. So I mean, I was despondent. I was in despair. And this story, it's basically about this complete stranger I met on an airplane,
Mm.
and he gave me a gift that changed the course of my life forever. And I don't say that, dramatically. I mean, it was that much of a big deal. I do believe it saved my life. And so that gentleman has since passed away, and I love that his legacy can continue through the book. So that's why it's my favorite chapter.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So I have, thoughts about this because I started my journey. So when I became alcohol free, I was like, whoa, I got too much time and energy. So I went to nutrition school and became a functional nutritionist. And I started working in that field, dabbling. I was still working full time. And eventually I studied to become an alcohol freedom coach. And then those two kind of blend. And so my business, The Sober Nutritionist, I work with people from time to time that do struggle with pain. And I'm curious, Lindsey, if any of your chronic pain story has maybe some root in that story of denying who you really were, pushing that down.
Call it 90% of it.
Yeah.
I have an autoimmune disease that can explain a little bit of what I experienced. But Terry, it was knowing from a young age, I am different, not only different from a sexual orientation standpoint, but different from being on the spectrum, which I was just diagnosed recently within the last few years. So I stuffed it all. Nobody could know. And I grew up in a really conservative town in West Texas, evangelical Christianity, Bible Belt to the core. Being gay was not even an option. And it was just the worst sin of all sins, an abomination. And so when you're growing up hearing these messages, even though I didn't know I was gay, it's not like I was 5. It was like, I identify as a lesbian. I didn't have the words. I didn't know what any of that even meant until I was 17. That's when I really came out to myself. But that's when I just dove into the closet. No one knew except this one therapist. I tried ex-gay therapy called reparative therapy. Very damaging. Um, but I just started denying myself. I started to cut off not the most important part of myself, but an integral part of who I am. I tried to sever it, cut it off, beat it down. I had so much self-loathing and hatred, and it really broke me. And then the more I was able to tour full time, I wasn't really ever famous, but the more my career grew, the deeper in the closet I had to go. And I remember there would be gigs where I'd be touring and I would be in so much pain that just to get through a 30-minute set, I would have to basically lay down right before I went on. I'd go on right afterwards, I'd have to lay down. I mean, the pain was just systemic, excruciating, and nothing that I tried, made any difference because it was not only trapped um, self-hatred, but I had trapped trauma that I had never dealt with. And I thought that I dealt with it. So it's not always the case. I mean, sometimes medically people have real, things that are going on. But for me, so much of it was psychological and emotional and physical trauma that I had experienced that had nowhere to go but inside my body. And so as I continued touring and, you know, just feeling this physical pain and it wasn't going anywhere, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And then when I came out, I thought, oh, maybe that'll help. But that didn't address the trauma that I still had trapped in my body. A wonderful book that I quote a lot in my book is The Body Keeps the Score, which I'm sure you've heard of. I mean, it's something I think everyone should read.
Mhm.
Honestly, read that book before you read mine, if I'm being honest with everybody who's listening. And I finally just gave up and I was like, okay, I'm not going to listen to the 30th doctor tell me that there's nothing structurally wrong with me. Your MRI is normal. Your blood work is normal. Your back is perfect. Your neck, da 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 da. There's nothing. You are, clean bill of health. But I'm grateful for that because it was only then when I realized, okay, I've missed something. And that's when I started digging into that emotional pain, that trauma, and now it's really rare for me to have a flare up. But when I do, the first thing that I get is curious.
Yeah. Wow.
Like my right shoulder has a tendency to flare up. I had an old injury from CrossFit a million years ago, and I used to just pop the ibuprofen, nothing wrong with that. I still do that, but that's my step two. Step one, I'll get curious. Okay, what's going on? I'll try to assess where am I feeling this in my body? What could that be trying to tell me? And then pain became my greatest teacher when it used to be my greatest enemy. I hated my body because it didn't do what I needed it to do. I needed to be able to run a marathon, play with my kids, tour, do whatever, and instead of hating my body, I learned to love it. I love it now more than I ever have. And, that pain, it's not completely gone, but oh, it's not debilitating anymore.
Wow. That's an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that. And it's such a powerful reminder that our body really does keep the score. I often talk about, I feel like I'm coming to know more about my body and sense more about my body late in life. I feel like most of me is a walking head, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right, I have a body. And so I'm
Yeah.
really, yeah, I'm really starting to, of course, since my own recovery journey, I've been much more open to meditation and breath techniques and tapping but I interviewed a woman on my podcast. I actually worked with her to develop a course, and it was all about pain reprocessing therapy. And it really was about this journey inward to recognizing that. And it's not about denying the pain, the person is in pain,
Hmm.
significant pain often. It is understanding that part of that pain is our thoughts
Yes.
about, our body. It's just this such a fascinating dynamic. And so I have to say I think this is in your book jacket maybe, but you say, so you talked about your coming out. You now say that gayness is your superpower.
I love that. Yes, it is. And I may have not made that up, so or maybe I did. We'll both take credit for
Yeah,
things
we're
today.
going to take credit.
I mean, it's like most things, right? Things that we thought were a weakness can also double as a strength, and the opposite is also true. But um, yes, it is open doors for me. I would not be where I am today if I was not gay, and I did not mean to make those rhyme, but that sounds like maybe a country song I need to write. Uh, yeah, the country world loves gay artists. No, so yeah, it's it's turned from being this, horrible thing that plagued me to walking through a journey where I reconciled my faith with my sexuality, realizing I don't have to choose. I don't have to hang up my faith card because you don't hang up a card. But I didn't have to turn in my faith card because I'm gay, and I also don't have to shut down that part of me because I have a strong faith. It's both and that can all exist at the same time. And so it is a superpower similar to how I've reimagined my ADHD or OCD, PTSD. I have all the letters, Terry. We have all the letters over here. I
You're
wish I
so
could put them.
lucky. You're
I'm
so
so
fancy.
lucky. I don't want to brag, but I have all the letters and my LGBTQIA plus. Um, but yeah, my ADHD, gosh, just was a huge obstacle. But now I've learned tools and resources to where I can now use it as a kind of secret weapon. So that's how I also feel about my sexual orientation.
Mm. Yeah, I have been saying for a long time that sobriety is my superpower. And it's, for me, it everything really shifted when I made this when I got back to who I am, if you want to in some small way parallel it to, understanding who I really am. I think this recovery journey for me and for so many of the clients that I serve it's about becoming and unbecoming.
Ooh, I love that.
And in order to do that, we have to actually embrace, like you said, we have to fall in love with the who we are. And we get so hung up on a label, or a label is bad, or a label is good. And even just like neurodivergent, I'm just thinking, how about if we just say we all have a brain? Like,
Right.
everybody's brain is divergent from everybody else's. We get
Yes.
so caught up in this. And I think language is important. And I think that recognizing that, you said something, you said, when I came out, I lost everything. What I think is so powerful is, but that's not the end of the story.
Nope. It was not. It was a really big semicolon, a very big semicolon. And looking back, not only was that not the end of the story, but I also didn't technically lose everything. I mean, I lost most of my family and friends in my career, and that was horrible. But I would not trade it for anything. I mean, even the way that it all unfolded, I would not change it, because every single step paved this road that led me here. I would not probably have my babies if I hadn't gone through that. So yeah, that's what fascinates me about life, is that I've now lost almost everything about 3 times. This most recent one, I looked at it completely different because of the book. It took me 3 years to write the book. But going through that process, my mindset, the way I view everything changed. So going through this most recent trauma that I'm still kind of in the middle of, um, I see it differently now. While I'm in it, I'm already seeing the gifts while I'm in it. Whereas, the first kind of two experiences, it wasn't until I was away from it and looked back and thought, oh, wow, look at all these amazing gifts that have come out of these horrible situations. And I know that another, horrible situation is probably going to come at some point. That is life. Uh, but now I know that I'm gonna handle it.
Mhm.
I may not handle it well, but I'm gonna handle it. And I know I'm gonna do my best, and I'm gonna show up as best I can, and I'll probably fail. And all of that's a part of it too. It's like none of it's wasted. Um, it's all there to be redeemed. Can I share something fascinating that I learned recently? Okay,
Yes.
this isn't in the book, sadly, because I had to stop writing the book like a year ago so that the editing process could unfold. But I started thinking about that concept of waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Mhm.
And everyone might know this. I didn't. But I love the origin of phrases. And um, it turns out that phrase comes from the olden days when, pretty much everybody lived in apartments, or, where you had a bunch of people in one building. So you would hear a bunch of noise, the walls were thin, chaos upstairs. But when you would hear a shoe drop, you knew that the person upstairs was getting ready to go to bed. When you would hear the next shoe to drop, your second shoe, you knew that that person was in bed. You were going to get peace. There was going to be no more noise. So somewhere along the way, somebody jacked that phrase and made it about, we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. We know what that means. Something horrible is coming on the horizon. But as I'm sitting there, I'm like, what if it's not just another shoe? And what if the shoe is not a weapon or something horrible? What if the shoe that drops is actually this feeling of relief? Finally, okay, this feels like a shoe is on my throat, that somebody's got their shoe on my neck. But even just that reframing, now when the other shoe drops, which, it seems like kind of every week right now, there's another shoe that drops. My very next thought is, oh, but it could be the second shoe of the guy upstairs that makes all this noise. And maybe this shoe dropping will lead to peace.
Mhm.
Thanks for, yeah, I'm so glad I got to share that.
It's so good. I've heard it said before, and I think Brene Brown tells a story where she talks about the other shoe because she has a body of work about foreboding joy. But Lindsey, what you just did there was you put it into the context. I think even Brene Brown leaves it at we wait for the other shoe to drop. And so we're in this constant, chaos and worry. And we think the next bad thing is going to happen. But you're exactly right. What the actual origin of that story is, it's not the next bad thing is going to happen. It's now that is the time of relaxation, the time of rest, the time of moving on to, taking that deep breath. And that
Oh,
is so
good.
important. It's the part we forget. We get so crazy making in our brains.
I know. I have breathed more in the last probably year than I feel like. I mean, obviously we all breathe, but I mean that mindful, just kind of a reset because my mind goes a million miles an hour. So sometimes I can, talk. Like Lindsay, you are not. I have a hedgehog named Hedgie,
Oh.
and at night he's running around his little wheel, and he's the most active creature on the planet. Like the dedication to his exercise is fascinating. I wish it inspired me to exercise more, but it doesn't. I usually am sitting on my couch watching an episode of Real Housewives and saying, "Get it, Hedgie, great job, buddy." But that's my brain. I mean, it just it's like, okay, rest, breathe, and sometimes just taking 3 deep breaths will reset my nervous system, and then I can keep doing whatever I was doing at the time.
Do you know who Mark Nepo is?
Mm-mm.
So he's an author, and I don't know his entire background, but he has a very famous book in certain circles. It's called The Book of Awakening, and it's
Ooh, I'm gonna
one
write it
of his
down.
books. And someone recently gifted it to me. A client sent it to me. And one of the first page, so you read it. What I love about this book, Lindsey, is it's a small, maybe you could call it, is it a homily when it's a small, like day by day? I don't know if a homily is the right word, but we'll pretend that it is.
I like
Great.
homily or like a devotional book, a
Yeah,
daily
kind of. And so
devotional.
what it is it's just you read it day by day. So I got the book like in late March. And so one of the very first passages that I read, and they're short and you read them, and you could read it for 10 years. You could read the same passage. It's going to land differently on, April 8th of next year. So I read this passage and he was talking about breath as he was talking about singing. And then he said, a baby's first cry, their first breath is the beginning of their song.
Ooh, that's so good. Oh, that is so good. Oh my goodness. And usually it's us screaming. So that makes a lot of sense. Like, wait, I was just in my mom's womb with all of this wonderful amniotic fluid, and what's happening now? And then it just kind of kind of keeps doing that, right? And we just have to learn, okay, this makes me want to scream. Also, I'm okay and I can breathe. Oh, I love that idea. Especially as a songwriter and a singer myself. I love that picture.
Yeah, and just that simple act of breathing is almost like this. To me, it made me think of like it's like a gift. It's like my song. As long as my breath is in the world, that is the song that I'm singing as,
Love it.
my continual song. I'm not a songwriter.
Do you sing?
No.
No, not at all.
I mean, I can sing. I kind of think I can sing a little bit, but then I listen to people that can sing and I think, oh no. And you have to have good breath work to be a singer.
That's what I heard. I heard that. So I never did singing lessons or anything. So if you were to watch me sing and let's say you were a professional singing teacher, I'm probably a disaster. I don't know any of the things I'm supposed to do. I still can't read music, believe it or not. But yeah, I'm supposed to breathe from this different part of all I do, I just sing. But it would be nice to probably use my breath better. I just, like I got enough on my to-do list. I'll worry about the breathing and singing maybe at a different time.
I love that. I love that. I want to ask you. So I wrote down I wrote down a couple of the chapters of the gift of, and the one that I was curious about was okay, so let me find it now. I wrote two. Where did I put my notes? There was the gift of addiction, which we talked about. The gift of waiting. I consider myself an somewhat impatient person. And I once had a boss, and she was like, we were getting to know each other, and she was like, "So tell me about yourself." And I said, "Well, I'm kind of impatient, like, da 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 da." And she said, "What are you doing to work on that?" And I was like, "I'm supposed to fix it? Like,
How
it's just
dare you?
part of my personality."
Yeah, this is not a character defect. This is just who
Exactly.
I am. I'm
Exactly.
impatient. Why is that a problem? I don't understand why that's a problem. That's so funny. So what did you tell her? Just nothing yet, but
I
apparently I'm
was
gonna
like,
start.
"Oh." I think I literally said, "I'm supposed to fix that."
That's amazing. That's so funny. Um yeah, look, I don't think that anybody is particularly patient. I mean, I don't know of a lot of people who are in a line at the grocery store, and especially now we just have a million things to do. Every minute is spoken for. I don't know anybody who just sits in the line. Maybe my dad. Maybe my dad. He's very patient, but I just think we've been conditioned to be impatient because we live in this ready-made world where I can go and pop something in the microwave and voila, here it is. Um, and that to me, oh, that was such a hard chapter to write. Um, I was, gosh, I had to write that chapter in the midst of the biggest waiting room that I had ever been in my life, metaphorically speaking, and that I have ever been in since. And I had to read that chapter. The audiobook is coming out soon, in a few weeks, but I read my own book, for the audiobook. And when I started to read The Gift of Waiting, I'd stopped writing the content about a year prior. And so I was reading it and hearing myself reading my own words, which was very, very powerful. But I was even deeper in that waiting room as I was listening to myself read those words. And man, that waiting room, that to me is the hardest place to be. Gosh, even if I'm in the middle of trauma, it's so overwhelming that it's a big distraction. Or if I'm at the top of the mountain, things are going amazing. Maybe I'm celebrating something like releasing the book. Nothing gets me uh to a place of desperation and need for my higher power than when I am waiting. I just don't like it. I don't think anyone likes it. And I also love it because looking back, those moments of waiting, gosh, like that's when I've grown the most. But I have a love-hate relationship with waiting completely.
What you said there that really hit home for me, and I hadn't thought about it this way. When we are waiting, there's no distraction.
Yeah, that doesn't that suck? It's like the best and worst thing ever because you're just left, and that's why so many of us turn to addiction.
Mhm.
A lot of the times it's in the waiting where we're waiting for something to happen or we're waiting to move through either way. We're not usually in the present when we're waiting. We're filling with distraction and what can I do to not feel this? So to pass the time, man, um, that's really the only time when I'm not hyper focused on something else and I just kind of have to sit in it and wait for it to run its course. Right now, I can't go into any detail because of legal reasons, but I am going through a divorce currently. And I filed like 7 months ago. And that's the type of waiting that, nothing can prepare you for. Just waiting on the process to conclude and to move past it. I don't like it, Terry. I don't like it. I want it to be over. I told God the other day, I said, look, we have a real candid relationship, me and my higher power. Cause I'm like, you made me, you made my brain. You know what you're working with. You know what you're dealing with. Like when my kids come up to me, I'm like, I pretty much already know what they're gonna say. You know what I mean? So it's like when I go to God, I said, look, big fan of the growth, huge fan of the pruning and the refining of all this stuff. But can I just have like a couple months off? Just a couple months where you don't have anything, earth shattering, or I don't want to grow just for a little bit. My character, totally important to build character. Yes, thank you very much. Also, I'm tired and I just need a break. So waving the white flag, like, can I just, I don't want any more character building for a while.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry you're going through that. And yeah, I agree. The white flag is a really great metaphor because I can picture, yeah, we do. We have places where we feel like we get to the end of our capacity. And so you mentioned the phrase like everything happens for a reason. So I have one. I also grew up, I didn't grow up evangelical. My parents weren't really religious. My grandmother was the grandmother that took her grandchildren to church on Sundays. And then my sister and I kind of made an independent decision to join a more evangelical church. And I did contemporary church for pretty much up until 2020. And then I've kind of redefined my own way I want to experience my faith and, my spirituality. But there is this phrase that kind of drives me crazy. And so I'm curious. And it is, God doesn't give you more than you can handle.
I was about to like launch into that, and then I thought, I'm just gonna pull back a little bit. So I obviously it's supposed to be in this space, since you just brought it up. That's fascinating. I think I interrupted you though.
No, that was it. That's the phrase
Okay.
that drives me crazy. And I have all my reasons why, but I want to hear yours.
Okay. I'm stepping on my soapbox. This is a big one for me, Terry. This is right up there with everything happens for a reason. When I know that people mean well, oh gosh, people mean so well when they say, God will never put more on you than you can handle, or God will never allow more than you can bear, whatever the sentence is. If that were true, which I do not believe that is true fundamentally, because I just have to look at my own life. There have been more times than I can count where I 1000% had more than I could handle, more burdens than I could possibly bear, to where I did not want to wake up the next day. So if that phrase was true, that God never puts anything on us that we can't handle or more than we can bear, what's the need for God? So if my kids, I'm a fallible, broken human being. On a good day, I maybe only drop 7 balls or plates, whatever. But if my kids came up to me and let's just say let's say my kid is 2 years old, and I'm like, hey, you have to put this tent together. Like, we're going camping. My twins are 2. Hey, 2-year-old twins, you have to put this tent together. Um, that is more on them than they can bear. This might be a really silly analogy, but I'm just going to go with it. And so what do? They would need me. Their lack of ability to handle the task or bear the burden, whatever the case may be, that alone gives space for me as their parent to come in from a place of love and be like, I got you. You're 2. You don't even know how to do anything, but rob me of sleep for years and years. I still feel tired and they're 11. um, but let me swoop in And I've been waiting for you to ask for help. So now when I get in those moments, instead of just God'll never put me on more on me than I can bear. And I'm a pull yourself up by your bootstraps, West Texas kind of gal. And, you know, when I finally realized, oh, the beauty, the story really begins when we give up and we say, this is way more than I can bear and I need you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that because
Thank you for that.
yeah, I have felt that way. And I thought that is the most untenable way that we describe that because I think also, even if someone is listening and they don't feel connected to a higher power, it also cuts off our human connection. It's also saying that, well, you do you over there with all of your burdens and you got it. And I'll just watch. And what you said is we get to swoop in and say, let me come alongside you. Let me
Yes.
walk with you. Let me take your hand. Let me take and bear with you some of those burdens. And gosh, we just missed the point.
I have never, I will say, I was today years old when you just said that and it hit me. I'd not had that community element. And community is so important. I write about that in the book. I write about who's in your waiting room is almost just important as how you're going to show up in the waiting room. Who is in the waiting room with you? Those few core group of friends. But I heard someone say community is common unity, and it's not kind of do it yourself and we're just all these islands, like, because so things are so much more than we can bear. Maybe it's not a higher power, maybe it is another human, and it's a human connection. That is so profound. I'm gonna have to process that later. I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And preferably someone who knows how to pitch a tent.
Right. I know. And that was just me shooting from the hip.
I love it.
Um,
And well,
that
it was a
kind of
great example because it's ridiculous. And when we say this to people, probably if I was someone who felt like I was at the end and, I work with people who they may start drinking because of a profound loss or grief or deep trauma. And I'm not a trauma informed therapist. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a coach. But I see people who the way the pain is partly isolation. And sometimes drinking feeds into that isolation. It's a way to numb. And so it's been said that the opposite of addiction is connection. And I think that's such a powerful reminder that we're not meant to bear everything alone. And when
no.
our burden is heavy is when we are supposed to get connected.
Yeah. Can I call you out on your own podcast
Yes.
or call you in? As I've heard it said, you said I'm just a coach.
Oh.
You're
Well, I
you're
want to make sure that I'm not nobody. I try not to play a therapist on the internet because I'm not
I
one.
get it. Yeah, I get it. I get it. But you are a coach and you are changing people's lives and you're impacting so many people's lives in a way that maybe, a therapist couldn't do. So I just want to encourage you, because I used to say, oh, I'm just this or just that. It's like, just remove the just. Oh my gosh, so
Yes, so
redundant.
good. Just remove the just. I love that. We had a conversation today in another group that I was with that reminded me when I listened to an interview you did with a friend named Father Lizzie. And this conversation in this group was all about when we feel like we're too much.
Mm. Yeah.
And someone said to me one time, you're always enough and never too much. And I try to remember that in those moments because for me, when I was drinking and over drinking, I drank sometimes to calm myself down, to make myself small. And I heard a little bit of that from that conversation with you and Father Lizzie. And I think it's such an important part of this journey that we go on with self-discovery.
Yeah. 100%. It's so that was a part of, I do this interview series called She's a Lot interview series. And I interview a badass woman, and then I release the interview every month throughout this year. So, now we've got three that have come out, and that was, gosh, one of my favorites. She's so fabulous. But to be able to challenge that idea that we've been raised, especially as women, if you show up as your full authentic self, she's a lot. That's what people said my whole life, and I know I am. And I now finally am like, so what? I'm a lot of passion. I have a lot of, stamina. I have a lot of I'm okay now, with being a lot. But I don't know. I think the more we show up as our whole selves, and we don't make ourselves small, um man, that begets even more growth and integration.
Yeah, I guess I missed the plot because I totally forgot that the name of that series is She's a Lot, which is, so fascinating because one of the things that I wonder if this rings true for you, Lindsay, or you've thought of this. I think sometimes that we don't want to take up too much space. And so we're taught to play small and we're taught to apologize. I can't tell you how many large groups I've been in where a woman will come off of mute on Zoom and she'll share her thoughts. And everybody's listening intently. And at the end, she says, "Oh, I'm sorry I talked too long," or, "Oh, that's all I had to say. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
and it's like, please don't come in my groups and apologize. We want to hear you. Your voice is important. So I love the flip the script of She's a Lot to, damn, she's a lot. And I like
Yeah.
it.
Right? I know. Look, the whole book is about flipping the script because I love that about life. I've always kind of been a contrarian. So that's why I love being in wealth management, which it just to this day blows me away that I am, I do this for a living, wealth management, financial planning, because I am so out of the box in that world. A lot of it is pale, male, and stale,
Oh,
right? And
yeah.
and so when I first got into the financial services industry, 15 years ago, oh my goodness, I was like, oh, all these, okay, everybody, there's these men, and they're very stoic, and they're very smart, and they're in suits. So I kind of tried to fit into that. Oh, but when I finally realized, uh, I've got to be me, because I want to attract the type of clients that would want to work with someone like me. And now I have this incredible practice with clients that I love, and they love their quirky, weird little financial planner, So yeah, I want to flip everything, all the scripts, even the book, the endorsements or the acknowledgments. I was supposed to go find these famous people to write about how great the book is. Um, Full-time working mom, single, twins. I just didn't have time. It is what it is. I didn't. I was like, and these people are going to say no, they don't know me. I'm not going to waste my time. So instead of having, famous people talk about, oh, Lindsay's so great, her book is so great. Um, I had my parents, say something. I asked my kids, and they said something, and one of it's my crotchety neighbor who's like, I'll read her book whenever she puts her trash cans out, back behind the house. When she starts doing that, I'll read the book. And then flipping those concepts of everything happens for a reason. I just want it to be where you read the book and you go, huh, if that's the goal, it's just, huh. And you start looking at stuff differently, challenge it, challenge all. God doesn't put more on you than you can bear. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's like, what does it really mean? Let's challenge it.
That's my favorite thing. And so I know you're not interviewing me, but you have this thing on your She's a Lot where you ask your guests what would be the chapter that they write a
Yes.
gift of. And so I just said, I'm just going to tell Lindsay
Please.
my chapter.
Yay, I love
And
it.
yeah, and this really feeds into where we've come full circle in this conversation and what you just said. But I think, my other superpower, and so mine would be the gift of curiosity.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That is my favorite C word, curiosity. So say more about that. You can't just throw that down and unpack it. Yeah, bye. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's exactly what you said is, huh. So to me, when I figured this out, and it was a long time coming, like you said, I'm today days old, but this was a couple years ago, maybe a few years ago. I realized that when I get curious, it suspends judgment.
That's so
And
good.
that is so helpful when it comes to dealing with humans and humaning myself, right? Is to take that judgment, which can be sometimes just that knee jerk reaction. And, to say, I wonder why my client's telling me this story. Or, oh, why is my dog barking crazy right now? Oh,
Right.
her toy is under the desk.
Right.
So instead of just being annoyed, like, oh, you're such an annoying dog, or, I don't understand why this person is just allowing that I can ask questions. And I share this with all my clients because we get so self critical. And
Mhm.
so if we can just say, use curiosity in all the ways, what do I really need right now? It's not a drink, it's not a candy bar. It's
Mm.
something more, it's something else. And we stop judging ourselves for, all of the things. And I just love it. So mine would be the gift of curiosity.
I'm so glad you shared that. You've done your research, girlfriend. I am very, very impressed. You did your research. The gift of curiosity. Yeah, I think especially as it relates to ourselves, that's been transformative for me. Especially, I talk a lot about never waste a trigger. Your trigger can be your best friend because your trigger is that canary in the coal mine. That maybe something is wrong, and we automatically tend to blame other people. But now, when I get triggered, regardless of what it is, I'm like, ooh, okay, what's coming up to be healed? Is there something that this reminds me of something from my past? I just start getting really curious and, yeah, I think I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Lindsay, for sharing your story, more about your book, and how you're doing life. I'm just fascinated, and it's so nice to have met you and connected with you. And I just love the work that you're doing in the world. So keep it up.
You too. Major, major heart hands for you, Terry. Thank you for inviting me and letting me talk about the book and myself and all kinds of random things.
It was so good. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Sober Edge podcast. This is a place for important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I want to invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, Becoming More, a guide to loving your sober life. And I would be so grateful if you enjoyed this podcast, if you would leave a rating and review, as it will help more people find their sober edge.